So
is that okay with everybody? I mean, I just want to check with the panelists. I mean, is that okay?
Yes, okay with me.
Yeah,
great,
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think just a few house rules before we get started. For our attendees, the chat function is disabled here. So if you would like to ask questions, we have a Q&A feature, or you can also raise your hand and, we'd be able to see, who wants to speak up. One more thing is that, of course, this session is being recorded because we want to use this information for our outreach later. Now, moving ahead, before we come to what this session is all about, I just wanted to quickly go over, who it is in the background that's going to be helping us. So, of course, we have Shoykot Ghosh, who's managing partner here at XLeap, and he's also the session moderator. As for the co-hosts, of course, there's me. I'm the strategic communications lead here at XLeap. I'm also joined by my friend Prithvi, who you can see on the screen. He's an associate consultant, and he's also a behavioral science whiz. And then, of course, there is Shivani. She is an associate consultant, as well as a previous Teach for India fellow. And she has an avid interest in composting. So we all are part of a design thinking firm called XLeap. And we work with change makers in building a kinder world. We work with those that share our vision of working for people, planet, and profit. And we help them by building up their strategic capabilities. And these change makers are actually spread all over the world. So till date, as you can see from the world map, we've worked with large corporations, legacy companies, foundations, and very recently, we've also been working with a growing body of nonprofit and grassroots organizations. And our driving motivation to do this is that we believe we can help these organizations make kinder decisions. As all of us know, that post-COVID, the scenario has forced many people to take hard decisions. In many cases, companies have had to walk a tightrope between being accountable to their shareholders or stakeholders while maintaining meaningful work. However, uncertainties aren't going away anytime soon. And we have a video that communicates this vision of ours. So I'm just going to be playing that.
We are at a crossroads. We have polluted our resources, there's raging forest fires, war, the fear of a recession, mass layoffs, and many more challenges. So how do we build with these uncertainties? We think it's by embracing transitions. But why this need? Because transitions are often hard. We fear change and want to run away from it. But we believe that change can be designed better. We are XLeap. We design for humans, where people, profit, and planet can coexist. We believe there are major transitions happening in strategy, where the need is for digital transformation and rebalancing supply chains. In culture, where the need is for diverse, inclusive, and psychologically safe workplaces. And socially, where strategic development of funds and building core capabilities of NGOs is needed. Transitions are not new, but how we do them is what will determine the future. So let's design for community and corporations. Let's design for people, profit, and planet. Let's design for a kinder world. We are at.
Okay, so as you saw in the video, we have kind of broadly shared the vision behind what really motivates us to work with change makers, right? But in addition to this, we have a design process. And we believe that businesses can achieve effective results by following what we think is a very unique approach here at XLeap. Now, the way we do this is that we take two things into account. One, of course, is we look at design, where we ensure that it's human-centered. So we look at things like equity, inclusiveness, and functionality. On the other part is the strategy aspect. And the strategy aspect is something which we believe is actually very important to an organization's roadmap as it's looking to grow and function in this world of uncertainty. Of course, at the center of this, as you can see, we put you, the user, because we believe that any sort of solution that we're coming up with, it doesn't really fit or fulfill its use if it's not designed keeping the user at the center. With this design process, we believe that businesses can actually achieve effective results. We think that for business to succeed, it's a result of two factors. And in fact, we refer to this as the kindness equation, where we think that kinder workplaces and a smart strategy equal to sustainable and also sustained performance. Now, of course, to figure this out, we're having an iterative discussion today, because, of course, this is our own vision, and we want to hear from some leading practitioners, some critical edge thinkers on the same. And we are being joined by a very special group of panelists. We have, first, we have Archana. She's a marketing director at Cloverly, a leading carbon tech company. She's based out of London, and she has vast corporate experience in India and a stellar academic record with a recent MBA from Oxford University. Next, we have Clifton Rajesh Grover. He's a technocrat, a consultant, an activist, and he has his own firm called Gem & Sam Workin. Now, Clifton has immense experience, not just as an independent consultant, but he's also moved from a corporate career to one which focuses on philanthropy and greater good. And of course, he was sharing a few of his experiences from one of these pet projects that he started called Kick for Tolerance, where he's able to unite children from both sides of the border in India and Pakistan to contribute to peace through the role of football. We're also joined by Christine. She's a managing partner here at Innovation Labs in Norway, which is based out of Stavanger. She's a business activist with a worldview, and she works with business leaders, urging them to build a culture and brand that encourages bold decision-making. Upashana is a celebrated journalist who now leads the knowledge management, communications, and marketing at Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center, which is a large nonprofit movement which has been creating a pipeline of young and compassionate leaders. We also have Ambarish Sharma. He's an ex-corporate director of HR at Katara Hospitality, which in itself is a Qatar-based hotel management giant. And last but not least, we have Avishek Addy. He's an investment professional at Amicus Capital. Avishek will not be able to join us in the session, but he has some pre-recorded material, which we'll be getting to later in the session. So having made these introductions, I'm now turning this over to Shoikat. Shoikat, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Dave. Wonderful to be here, kicking this off. And I think what's really great is the diversity of the panel that we have here, and it's quite amazing to see this. And I see the gallery view coming, and I think you can see diversity. I think that's also, I think, important sometimes. Although I must say that I think from I know most of them, to some degree, and I think one thing that kind of connects all of them together is the ability to be kind and empathetic. While I think all of them know and talk and practice leadership in its real sense, and I think that's the combination that is really, really going to be critical. Because to my understanding, kindness is great to talk about, but it's not easy always, right? It's a choice, and it's these choices that are all sometimes difficult, sometimes controversial, sometimes a step in the unknown into ways, right? And since probably not all of us have all the answers, the idea is that how do we get all these brains together, and also a fairly large audience who's also joined us, and I would think that they are also coming in from different places, maybe some joining from home, some joining from their workplaces, and also carrying their own diverse views on this subject, right? And we would like to also include that as the discussion kind of progresses. So how we would like to kind of go through this session is to kind of look at around 45 minutes to an hour of problem solving, interesting problem solving that we can do, which can be conversations. It was like the conversation that we were having just before we actually started off, right? Building on each other, really being ourselves in the session. We'll have a bit of a structure to it. We'll flow through that. After that, at the end of that, we would like to keep about 15-20 minutes at the end for also to kind of bring in the audience, bring in their perspectives. They may have points of agreement, disagreement, and we would love to kind of hear those as well. So that's broadly the structure. Prithvi here is going to be the whiteboarder, so he's going to own the whiteboard. So what we have thought of is that I'm sure that this is going to be a enriching conversation, a lot of different ideas. Why don't we have a whiteboard where we start capturing these ideas and thoughts and kind of start building on them so that it kind of stays with us in some way. So Prithvi is going to help with that. Shivani is also going to keep an eye out for the audience and see if they are in sync with what some of us are saying in the panel. Are there alternate views maybe, or are there views which are supporting some of the discussions that are taking place, right? So that's really how we are setting this up. And there are no rules except one, which is let's hear everybody as if our lives depend on it. So oftentimes we speak like our lives depend on it. So maybe today, all of us, including the audience, let's listen and hear as if our lives depend on it, right? And maybe we'll come up with something nice. So kind of that's it. We can start off, hopefully. Now, to start off, I thought what will be really interesting is to just be a lot more personal, a lot more authentic about kindness when we're speaking about kindness, right? And it can mean different things to each one of us because of our own life experiences, right? So we would love to maybe start off by hearing from each one of you your experience with kindness in business, right? Whether it could be a kind event, it could have been an unkind event, but something which has stayed with you. So if each one of you can briefly share something, that'd be awesome. And Christine, if you're okay, if you can begin with you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I, as you said, work out from Norway, and our biggest industry here is oil and gas, which I started my career working in for almost 8 years, and then I transitioned into finance. I've been working on building strategic brands for almost 30 years. And at a certain point, I realized that both these industries, oil and gas and finance, are not really kind industries, but the people who work in them are kind. So my last corporate job was with DNB, which is the biggest financial institution in Norway. And we made a transition in the marketing, or the way of thinking around marketing, which was simply put, leaving the traditional way of campaigning and selling because we needed to sell certain products and we thought that our customers needed this and that. And we transformed this way of thinking into how can we help our customers and who need us. And that was just the beginning of a huge transformation that took place for about, I think, 10 years. And now it's been 5 years since I left because I thought we really hit something. And that inspired me so much that I actually resigned because I wanted to work the same way with more companies. And now I haven't specialized in any industries, but I'm happy and lucky to work with like one of the biggest engineering companies in Norway and startups. And of course, most of my clients are in between those. But kindness to me is to actually make the businesses human, make the business about the people who work there and the people who have various stakeholder roles with regards to the business and the society. And as I said, DNB is, I think, at least they were, I don't know, I'm not sure what's happening there right now, but they have been a really good role model for that way of working and that way of thinking. I think that's,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful, Christine. There's something that I'll come back to, and I think I love the distinction that you made between the business or the corporation and the humans there, right? And I think that's a very interesting thought we'll probably come back to, right? Clifton, would you love to go next?
Yes, happy to. Thank you, Shaikat. Hello, everyone. I'm Clifton Grover. I'm born in Berlin, in Germany. Now I'm living in Munich, and in a kind of former business life, and I'm going to share with you a story where I experienced a not so kind situation and was treated, I would say, pretty unkind in business. In a former life, I was working in the telco industry as a product manager, and it was a pretty small startup in the beginning, and we were all very much engaged. Also, going through hard times and contributing from year to year with our own salaries, voluntarily, just to be able to carry on. And when there came better days, this company, this telco company, was sold to a larger group and to a new owner. And actually, one of the first measurements this new owner was carrying out was to confront all of us with new contracts. And it's no surprise that these contracts were had much worse conditions to what we were, having before. And so we wanted to have a word with this new owner. And that was the situation where I experienced very heavily this, unkind behavior, because this new owner came from Frankfurt in the middle of Germany, flew into Munich, where our offices were, pretty quickly after we have requested to talk about. And we thought we would have a conversation about it, but the new owner was simply opening the conversation with, "I'm not going to discuss with you anything. I'm just going to explain to you what we're going to do." And so not being, able to raise your own voices and to share your interests, there was no openness. That was a moment where I felt very badly treated, and I wanted to share with you this situation, which I felt, in our kindness context, I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences, and actually also for the company, for the new owner, it was a kind of beginning of the end of his purchase of that smaller company he acquired, because from that day on, many managers started just to look somewhere else and to leave this company, including me. And that was a direct consequence of this, bad experience. So this is something I wanted to share with you. Thank you, Shaikat. Back to you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Clifton. I think uh, thank you for being okay to be vulnerable and share that. I think that was a very personal story. So really, really appreciate that. I think and I think you know we've all probably had our own share of bad experiences ourselves, and maybe at some point it's also possible that um, that I may have done something which has been seen as unkind to somebody else, and maybe I've realized it, maybe I've not realized it, right? But thank you so much for sharing that, Clifton. Really, really appreciate that. Great. So from that, let's move to maybe Ambrish, if you want to come in.
Right. Hello, everyone again. I come from HR fraternity, so you can imagine, I mean, we are at the front line of what goes on in organizations when it comes to the most sensitive subjects about the employees' life cycle within the organizations, right? From hiring till they leave the organization and beyond. So if I were to tell you about, the experiences which I have had over last close to 20 years of my working life, it would really be a lot of a mixed bag. And that's primarily because, not all organizations believe in kindness. And that's a shame because they should. And we all know that the impact it has on employee engagement and motivation and everything else that they contribute to the organization becomes 10 times better if they feel that the organization is kind and they'll be taken care of if there is an event which impacts them. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I've seen massive layoffs in some of the organizations. So just to give you a brief background, I come from TCS and Wipro background in Bangalore in India. And those organizations are, as you would know, very large, complex matrix organizations where you have multiple geographies to handle and different diverse background employees who come from absolutely every part of the world. And I think it's about 154 or 160 countries which both these companies operate in, and 300,000 plus employees on an average at a given point of the year. So why I'm saying that they have been much better as compared to some of the others I have worked with is because for example, layoffs, which is the burning topic now with Meta and Twitter and Byju's in India and so on, laying off thousands of employees without, I would say, proper planning, which could have been done much better from the HR functions, but also in terms of the sheer way it is handled in the media and the amount of stress that it puts on employees and their families who get impacted. Unfortunately, in Middle East, the trend is much more apparent, and the treatment of employees in this part of the world is a big topic of discussion globally, and it has been the case for a very long time. So the framework of the employee engagement doesn't really exist in most of the organizations, especially the local organizations in the Middle East. The ones which are multinational have, of course, adopted, European or American models of employee engagement. But then in general, when it comes to the way people are treated, especially the outgoing employees, has a lot to be desired. Recently, I faced, just before I left Qatar Hospitality in September, there was an exercise which was done to ensure that the Qatari employees get a priority. The Qatari employees are the local leaders. And, the idea is to give them opportunities which are currently with the expats. So the way this entire exercise was planned at the board level had a lot to be desired. And it basically meant that one fine day, a Qatari employee takes over the position of an expat employee, and the expat employee is given a 3 months notice pay, and he is on his way. But then I think it's much better if organizations plan for this to include outplacement kind of programs, where organizations themselves help these outgoing employees to get alternate placements. Now that's primarily a policy matter, Otherwise, it becomes very subjective depending on who's the CEO and how the board of directors think. So building organizations kinder, in my opinion, has to start from a very systems thinking, where we try and incorporate some of these initiatives across the entire gamut of not just HR, but the business itself, to ensure that every aspect of your policy and decision-making process includes kindness as an inherent factor. So unless we institutionalize these practices, we are looking at drastic situations where you will have not just mass layoffs, but employees leaving voluntarily because they don't feel taken care of. And that's where I think the role of HR becomes most important. And that's where my focus has been. So whether it's in an advisory role or the leadership roles which I've held in the past in HR departments, my personal approach has been to be extremely kind when it comes to these situations. So those are my starting remarks. Thank you, Dr.
Oh, wonderful, Ambaresh. Again, thank you for sharing something very personal, very recent. And I think it lays it out so beautifully, right? I think, the other dimension of this, right? So, which is that, we are speaking about kindness as a kind of the kind of decision that you're taking. At one end, it seems that somebody can justify that decision through the rules, right? I mean, maybe the rules allow certain things, right? But is that the right thing to do? And what are the consequences of that? And are we really thinking long enough, right? Is probably a very interesting thing that you've brought up, Ambaresh, right? And is that part of the culture, right? In some ways. So thanks for bringing that up, Ambaresh. Next, maybe we'll move across the time zones and move over to Upashana from Dhaka. Upashana, if you want to share a few thoughts.
Thanks, Shekhar. So I think I completely agree with what Kristen has said, right? About being human, right? Even when we are working with people, that's when working with people, with beneficiaries, with we tend to think of them as these numbers, like I need to get these numbers, this amount of beneficiaries, or I need to sell this to these many customers. So when I was a journalist, and I had been a journalist for around 6-7 years. When I was a journalist, that's where I saw unkindness play a lot. Not that it doesn't happen in the development sector. It does, very ironically. You're supposed to be helping people, and then the amount of unkindness that I've seen is astounding. But in journalism, there's this hustle going on, right? You're the person who needs to get the first bite. I think you've all heard about the Rana Plaza incident that happened in Bangladesh in 2013, where thousands of workers were crushed under a building. During that time, I was reporting on that as part of my duties as a reporter with the Daily Star. And there were like a lot of other senior reporters over there. And I wasn't very experienced then. I was quite new to the job. And so one of the things that I saw that was like very shocking to me was like, somebody that we had respected, this journalist that we had respected a lot, that I looked up to growing up, she would be like shoving the microphone, in front of these victims or their families, and like, how do you feel? What are your thoughts on this? What do you have to say? And these people, they're in shock, and they're just like, they don't know what to say, and they're like just bawling their eyes out, and you're just exploiting the most vulnerable incident. You're exploiting them at their most vulnerable time, and at a time that they've lost their loved ones. It's something that that really like stayed with me, even like so many years later. That was one point where I was just like, I don't really need the bite if this is what I need to do to get it. I can be patient, and I can approach a problem with compassion. So yeah, that's, I think, unkindness in terms of how we, how we address an issue, how we are like, approaching other people, our beneficiaries, the people that we're talking to. That is something that that I wanted to like touch upon. Personally, of course, there's like lots of incidents of unkindness that we've all gone through, but yeah, that I can talk about that later at some point.
Thank you so much, Upashana. I had not thought of this angle about what we see on a daily basis on TVs, right? Me in India, I see this every day on a TV. In fact, to the extent that I've stopped watching news channels to a certain extent. But this is absolutely, and you're right, this is business, because at some level possibly it's media business which is driving this kind of a behavior, but we'll get to that. I think that's a very interesting point. And let's round off this first part of the session maybe by listening to Archana. Archana, thanks for joining in, and what's the view from London?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. So I mean, really great, interesting perspectives that each of the panelists have talked about. I want to, there have been many instances of kindness, unkindness that I've faced in my own personal life, working in different corporations. That's for later. But I want to, continue the thread that Upashana just spoke about, how organizations can tend to use the situation to exploit people to, get what they think is good for the organization, right? So I work in climate, and that's where you see exploitation at like the dimensions of exploitation are really difficult to comprehend. It's that huge, right? You see companies exploiting resources, companies exploiting people. And so every day in my work, I keep seeing organizations that are, trying to greenwash, doing lots of things that are unkind, and unkind as a human race. They're not doing things that are good for us in any way. But I also feel that, being at the center of this whole climate discourse has meant I see kindness in several ways too. I see people trying to, change the moral fabric of an organization to see, okay, so far we've been like the bad guys. How can we be the good guys now? How can we be kind? And that goes beyond just, looking at the planet. Many of them have gone back and said, all right, we want to be B Corps. We want to be, by the employees, and lots of conscious action and thought is going into a lot of companies because of climate and this whole ESG movement that's coming in. So that's something that keeps me hopeful and, makes me want to continue working in climate. So, yeah.
Wonderful. I think that's a great note to end on, right? That there's still hope, right? And that's really what we are probably here for, right? That let's start at least figuring a way out. I think the real reason for this small event is that as leaders and managers out there, right, globally, right, and I think I just saw something on the Q&A as well, that, and I think Christine mentioned this, that people are generally kind, right? As humans, we are born kind, mostly, right? I haven't seen that someone born unkind, but somewhere along the way, certain things happen to us, right? But if we have to, we fall under a system, a larger system, a larger organization that kind of drives certain behaviors. But what is the role of individual leaders and managers, right? And I think at some point it becomes a very difficult trade-off when I'm in my job to know, if there is a decision, there is a certain organizational requirement versus something I think my heart tells me is the right thing to do. And that's where certain people, face a really difficult choice. And that's a trade-off. And possibly what we are looking to search today in this entire discussion is that, can we come up with a template or some mental model to help leaders and managers anywhere in the world, any kind of organization, to better deal with such situations where they have to make a trade-off, right? So that's really what we are driving towards. And this was a fantastic start. And thank you all for sharing, your personal thoughts here. And let's see if we can, and maybe Prithvi, I'll ask you. We heard a lot of things, and are we able to kind of see if there is any pattern coming through? Are there certain buckets that we can put some of these thoughts into? Any can we maybe take a look at the whiteboard and see if we can start slotting them into certain things?
Sure, I'll just start sharing my screenshot.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So might have to zoom in a bit. Okay, I think that'll do. So great. I think, okay, so there are some good experiences, but obviously we've spoken a little more about not so good experiences, which is fair. So, we spoke about, of course, everything that from Christine to Archana kind of spoke about. And I think I'll pick on maybe some of the good experience that you've written about, which is the human-centered business models, seeing the people within the commerce. I think that's a great strain of thought, right? And I think Archana brought up the idea of continuing ESG movement, fighting against climate exploitation. There are certain things that are happening, while there are obviously things that are still, not happening, or there's a lot, but there's a directional push in some ways, right? Now, if we move ahead and try to see, Prithvi, if we can figure out that, can we deconstruct kindness, right? I mean, or unkindness, right? When we are speaking about unkindness, what is the decision factor? Who are we being unkind to? Is there a way to kind of look at that, maybe? Right, and we were obviously thinking about this a little earlier, right? And I mean, before the discussion, and we were kind of wondering whether unkindness happens in our interaction with employees, with our interaction with customers, our interaction with society, and maybe there could be others that we haven't thought about, right? And I was wondering if we can pick up some of the examples that you all spoke about and see if these are buckets that are making sense, right? And the idea is, again, to deconstruct the problem so that we can carry this forward into a problem solving. I think we heard a lot about the unkindness to employees bit, right? We heard from Clifton about his very personal experience about employees really wanting to have a voice, but that voice being completely denied, right? So a voice being denied is probably a very, very unkind thing to do. I think we heard from Ambarish, right, about layoffs not being planned well, right? Or that entire process not being compassionate enough in some ways, right? So in some sense, it's probably a lack of compassion. I would say, I would put it broadly, lack of compassion in HR process in some ways, right? Is probably some things that came out here in terms of what we just heard. Before I go to customers and society, maybe I'll just put something in others. And I was wondering whether the example that Upashana, you mentioned, right, where media is really exploiting the person at their most vulnerable, right? Now that person is neither an employee nor a customer. Yes, maybe part of society, but at that point of time, that person has just become a product, essentially, to sell. Their emotions have become a product in some ways, right? So maybe I'd like to put that in the others bucket and see if you can figure something there, which is exploiting the vulnerability of people. And thanks for that. Going back to customers, I think Christine, the point that you were making about working in industries which probably by nature, by their origin, were unkind to some extent, and then within that you kind of looked at marketing, where you're selling something to make sure that that is a little kinder. So maybe could you elaborate on that a little bit more to explain how was it been unkind to customers earlier? If you could share something there.
Yeah, I think it's on several levels actually, because on one level, it's the arrogance around deciding what your customers need based on a very introvert need, actually. You know, looking at your numbers and figuring out that, oh, we need to sell more of this because we need to make more money is not being kind to customers. But I also thought of when I heard, I think it was Upashna who was in climate, because when it comes to oil and gas as well, it's a very diverse issue in Norway, because we see that what we produce is better than many of the alternatives. We know that on a global level, there are so many people who lack energy, but the discussions that take place in the media are often colored by the needs of providing Norwegian workplaces. And I'm not sure, you know, although that is kind of taking care of your people, it's still not taking care of your people on a long term. So what's most important? Yesterday, I just experienced that one of the projects that I'm working on actually was subtracted or postponed. They're not going to develop one of the oil fields that are placed in the Arctic areas in Norway, which results in me losing a contract, but still making me kind of feel good about it, because that is the first time I've seen that we're actually putting people and environment first, although they are saying it's about finance, but it's still a sign that we're making our decisions based on the climate and the planet and the environment for people more than making more money. So I don't know, this was a big answer to your question. I don't know if you got any sense out of it.
No, absolutely. And I think, first of all, good to hear that. I think good to hear that, and that, at least, those decisions are being taken for whatever reasons it might be. And of course, there are pros and cons, right? I mean, there are, parts of the world like ours, which are energy deficient, right? So energy is needed, right? But on the other hand, do we really need another well in the Arctic, right? I don't have the answers, but I think it's good. If you feel good about it, I think it's fine. But I think what you said is yes, which Prithvi you put up on the whiteboard as well, is deciding what customers need, right? And not necessarily always the right way, right? And maybe if I take that a little forward ahead, for example, now, if for example, as organizations, as the big corporations, big government, maybe at some point we decided that people need to be mobile, need to travel a lot, and they need to use cars, right? And they need to use my fuel, right? Now, we can always go back and, debate these kind of things, but are we, by lowering down prices to a certain level, increasing the access to, let's say, fuel, have organizations at some point driven a customer need to actually drive more and blow up more, fuel, for example, right? Yes, Christine.
I just wanted to add, because I realized when you were writing down the deciding what customers need, is it to do with prioritizing? I haven't thought about it this way, but I just realized that it's about prioritizing numbers more than what people need. And I think that's the unkindness.
Yeah. So prioritizing the numbers as in the top line or the bottom line over what people need. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean that, yeah, we're like, businesses are often prioritizing what makes the numbers, what improves the business's numbers more than what improves people's lives.
Yeah. Got it. No, absolutely. In fact, just a small example, right? I mean, I have at some point worked in the financial industry myself, right? And there used to be a tremendous pressure to sell a lot of insurance policies, for example, right? And I have known business leaders myself who had, mandated their teams across branches to sell really risky insurance products to senior citizens walking into the branch. Now, when senior citizens walk into their branch and want to do something with their money, you would ideally want them to put it in a safe, some kind of a safe deposit, right? Because it's the end of their lives and you need to protect that pool. But they were sold these insurance products because they had to prioritize their numbers and probably just missold products. I mean, probably, to the point that you're probably mentioning, Christine.
I think that's a great example. That's exactly what I mean. I think it's also transferable to the oil and gas, that we're more concerned about the numbers than the health of our planet too often.
Absolutely. And of course, I think there was I think Prithvi, you're writing something about the society, lack of concern over the planet's health, right? And yeah, I think that directly impacts human species and therefore the society as a whole, right? Yeah. So do you think as a panel, I'll just like to, ask that, is it okay if we break down unkindness that businesses showcase or leaders showcase, that these happen at some of these touch points, primarily at the employee touch point, the customer touch point, and the social or the community touch point? Would that be a fair way to kind of look at this? And if anybody in the audience may have a view also, please feel free to come in. In fact, I think there are a few questions. So I'm just trying
I think that's a great way to.
Yeah, go ahead, Archana. Go ahead, Archana. Go ahead, Archana.
I was saying, I think it's a great way to break it down because you're looking at different stakeholders for the organization, and for each of them, there's a different definition of kindness and unkindness, and it'll be good to look at both of that. And maybe to what Anupam had asked in the questions, like, what do we really mean by kindness and unkindness, right? Like, each organization has different definitions of that. And as a group here, I don't think we have a clear understanding of what we think is kindness.
Yes, Clifton.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a very exciting moment because we are getting closer to the true core of the meaning of kindness. And I have two questions. Just I want to share these with you, and I don't have the answer, but perhaps it's worth reflecting on this. So, has kindness to be selfless? That's question one. Or is the concept of kindness can be understood in the sense of those who gives kindness, or the one who gives kindness and the one who receives kindness. So it's an advantage for both of them. So that's a different view. So selfless or advantage for both. And also, if we transfer this into the corporate context, I think, and then as a part of a possible leadership or management concept, I think that makes a huge difference how we understand kindness. Back to you, to all of you.
No, absolutely, great point, right? So I think just to address the question of what is kindness, right? And I think, I've been, reading up about that and, kind of trying to hear different perspectives on that. And I think there is no one definition, right? And there's no, so it's not a scientific, rational concept. And which is where definitions often fail, because when we are looking at anything which is more human, more value driven, oftentimes the exact definition is kind of as we make up. But essentially, I think a lot of people talk about compassion essentially, right, as being kindness, right? And to Anupam's point, I think absolutely so true, right? Organizations will have to make tough choices at different points of time. That's the business reality. There are times when you'll have to take tough decisions. As leaders, you may also feel really bad about those decisions, but you have to take those decisions. So, for example, he's taken the example, Anupam, of Meta firing, laying off so many people at the same time, while giving them a fairly generous severance package. Now, would that be termed unkind or kind, right? And my own view is that probably we can't look at it from a distance without having enough evidence of what really has transpired to say whether it was kind or unkind. But from everything that I'm being hearing on social media, I feel that it was probably done in a kinder way than it was done at Twitter, for example. So the way it was dealt with, the way communication came through, probably made it feel a little better for people. Of course, personal pains, will be there, and that's something that is again part of the reality. But probably it felt better. And I think, Clifton, this goes back to the point you said, that whether did we have a voice, were we heard, and or were we, were our emotions taken into account? Probably is probably the key thing. Yes, Upashana.
I agree with what Clifton has said about, like, we need to probably there's that misconception perhaps that that kindness is like being selfless. Like, when I look at it from this perspective that even when you're taking difficult decisions, which you have to do as a leader, as a manager, working in institutions, there is a kinder approach to it. I'm not going to go into the Meta and the Twitter debate of the things, that's a larger conversation. But I do think that, even when you are taking decisions about a layoff, how abrupt are you about informing? Have you given them the notice? Have you informed them of, about the situation that you're in? Have you tried to involve their perspectives into your decision making before taking this, huge decision? Is there any? Did you try every other alternative before coming to such a huge decision as something as impactful as a layoff? So these are all things that you can look into before, going into such a massive decision that can change people's lives. So that is something that I think when we are thinking about something as impactful as a layoff, or even in terms of recruitment, whatever we are thinking of, these are things that we can take into consideration. During COVID, for example, right, there were huge layoffs. A lot of people had to let go. Then there were companies which decided that, we are not going to do this right now. I can say from my own perspective, BYLC made sure that no one was, fired, no one was laid off. What we instead did is that we explained to our colleagues that it would be difficult for us at this time, because we had lost a huge project. A UK aid was our donor at that time. We had lost a huge project because they were cutting down on their funding. So we told them that it would be difficult for us to give you any kind of increment or promotions at this moment. We will continue it in a later. But this is something that we have decided. We are not going for layoffs. Our founder is very particular about it, but we will instead compromise on this. So, these little compromises, like these human-centric decisions, I think that is what we need to perhaps look into when we are thinking about kind decision-making.
Yeah, I think that's very well put, Upashana. Fantastic. So maybe we'll just also this is getting interesting, right? And let's move ahead. And where I want to really now, really want all of your views to come in is to understand. So I think if I take a step back, what we have discussed so far is that, what has been experiences that we have had, which have felt unkind to us, right? Either we have observed it somewhere or it has happened to us. We have felt that it was an unkind situation, right? Then we have tried to break it down and saying that, okay, in what are these kind of unkindness? What are the touch points at which these unkindness happens? Then we have opened up the debate to a point to saying that, okay, what defines kindness? What are real business decisions, which are hard decisions to take sometimes, versus what can be classified as kindness? Are we being superfluous here, right? And I think broadly where we are heading towards is saying that, number one, I think you feel it when it's unkind, right? When it's done in a certain way. So the method in which certain things are done, makes a difference. But there are certain places where it is a clear breach of any human values, right? Whether it is the example, Upashana, you mentioned about the media, whether it is misselling products, whether it is not giving the audience to the employees to discuss their issues. Those are clearly practices which reek of unkindness in some ways, right? So there are possibly some hard business decisions which could be dealt in a different way, dealt better, but hard decisions will still need to be taken. But there are certain decisions that people and organizations are taking which are clearly breaking, the basic tenets of human values, for example, right? Now, if we just focus on those which are clearly, seemingly, they're not the right things to do, right? Those if you've discussed here. There are people taking those decisions, right? There are leaders, managers, business owners who are taking those decisions. I would try to really, ask each one of you, what do you think is driving that kind of a behavior? You have spoken about multiple examples. If you can just think back and wonder, I mean, if we can all wonder about what might be some of these reasons why somebody is taking a decision like this. And yes, Archana, you have your hand up, so go for it.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about it, and when I've seen people being kind versus people being unkind, I think it translates from the leadership. And a lot of times, middle management is where, as an employee, you tend to face unkindness because your immediate boss or their boss is, not as empathetic to the situation that you're facing, or, it ends up being unkind. I think it's because of assumptions that the middle management has sometimes on what they think that the top leadership wants, that they think that profit over people is what the top leadership wants, right? So breaking down some of those assumptions is something that every leader at whatever level they should definitely work on.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Archana, right? You're saying that a lot of the execution of things that happen through the senior management or the middle management. And are we sometimes making presumptions about what the business wants in terms of the trade-off between, all these different factors, right? And can we break those down? I think fabulous point. I think, Christine, you had your hand up earlier, so I'll go to you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think this is kind of related to what Archana just said, because I think it's something systemic as well. I remember I read about how the way work life is today is a system that actually started probably in the 19th or 20th century, when a lot of people were not educated and they started working in big factories, and you needed a system to kind of guide them and tell them how to work and what to do. And somehow this has just evolved into what we view as the traditional way of running an industry today. While as now we're approaching a time where a lot of our knowledge, our common knowledge, is not needed anymore because we have machine and other tools to help us. And we actually need to deep dive into ourselves and to find out, how am I working and how am I going to apply my abilities the best way for the business I'm working in. And when our system is not designed for that way of operating our lives, there is a huge mismatch. And I think that's not, that's not really unkind. It's just something that has evolved. And right now we're in this environment, which I think this discussion is a brilliant example of, because we're realizing that we really need to fix some of the systemic base that we have and that we operate on today.
Great point, Christine. I think, yeah, you're saying that the context in which we are working and operating is something designed 100 years back in a very different world. And, we have to quickly realize where we are now, and change the system, change the way we are thinking about the system itself, right? And I think that's a great point. And it also goes back to, I think, Archana's point, like you said, about the carrying the presumptions. And as individuals, we might be carrying presumptions of from an earlier time as well. Great point. There's someone from the audience, in fact, dear friend Ludovic, who's got his hand up. So maybe we'll just pull him in. Ludovic, please go with your question or response.
Yes, thank you, Saikat. Can you hear me?
Yes,
right,
Ludovic.
Yes, okay, great. Yes, yes, I wanted to add some views about this your topic now. So, and my understanding, one of the underlying reason, maybe one of the main reason of unkindness is we can have a look about the purpose of company and the purpose of business, because the way you put your purpose, you will drive the way you behave. So at now we all know that purpose of the main companies is about generating profit, earning money. So any kind of way that will lead you to reach this purpose don't take care about human aspect. Or you can if you have this feeling, but you will face to some I will say discrimination. You need to choose, because sometimes both are not, at least people think both are not compatible. So they will choose to think about the generating money that take care of people. So one thing I believe is that we need to change the purpose of the business and make it something like more taking care of community of people, and that should be the real purpose of business. Improve society, improve the way of living of people. When we bring solution into the market, it should be always for this, not to get money. And we have at now many research from great organizations like Harvard, even some big fours actually, and telling us that if you put community and society as your purpose, you will make a lot of change in your organization, not only generating financial profit, but also taking care. People will feel better. They will have great motivation to work with you, because you are serving something, higher than just making profit. And just to conclude my point, and to follow the last point of Christine, I remember you were talking about maybe 100 years ago, the way of we were doing business, and we still have the same context now in our organization. But I remember also, to take an example of Jamsetji Tata, which is considering like a father of the Indian industries. So he built a Tata industry 100 years ago also. And he clearly stated that community should not be put just as another stakeholder, you know, like shareholders, customers, and then you put community besides them, but should be the very purpose and the very focus of business. And he built all the industry of Tata and in this view, and all the generation after keeps this his view. And we know that in India, Tata is seen as like, you know, state in the state because of all he's doing for the community, building hospitals, school, etc., and taking care of people. And Indian people are very proud to work for Tata because of this. So I think the main subject for me of unkindness will be purpose, and I will also join the point of Clifton few minutes back about selfness. When you talk about purpose and community, for sure, it's about taking care of the world before of yourself or just your company first. Thank you for the few minutes of talk, Shakil.
Hey, thank you so much, Ruvik. Amazing point, and I think amazing point around the purpose of business, right? And I think that takes it really deeper, because probably it probably stems from there, right? A lot of the other points that we have been speaking about, right? That, you know, and purpose in some ways is also getting determined by, you know, probably the social, cultural background and the norms that somebody's coming from. And you know, and that is something that we can get into. In fact, I'll just keep that point noted, but I know that, and there's a bunch of questions from the audience. We'll come back to some of them, but I think Upashana, Clifton, you have your hands up, so please go for it. Upashana, maybe you can go. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think there are two things that I was wondering that maybe they could, you know, they could be underlying reason. One is that, you know, the misuse of authority. I do because I can. So it's as simple as that. I have the authority to exploit you, and I will show it. You know, it can be used in a good way, of course, like, you know, the way most of all the panelists over here are doing. They're using their power and they're using their authority for the good. But it can also be used in a very negative way, that I will use my authority to show you that I am the one in power. And the other thing is that, you know, seeing people, like we discussed this before, like, you know, the human angle of it, seeing people as resources and targets. So the people who are working for me are the resources, and the people I'm working for, my customers or my beneficiaries, they are the targets. So these can probably be two underlying reasons, according to me.
Great point around the power. I think that's a critical point, right? I think the differential that we see can be driving a lot of the actions, right? That I think I can do and get away with this, or I should be doing this, right? Clifton, please go for it.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I wanted to follow up on Ludwig's thoughts, which I found very insightful. Basically, what I understood, actually, a kind of core question is profit making and being kind a contradiction, or does it go together with? That's what I, you know, as a takeaway, that was a core question, perhaps I understood. And he also brought up a question which we can derive from there, because he looked at the system level. So we are speaking about designing kindness on a corporate level, but what about the framework where corporates, you know, need to act in, need to survive? That's the system question. And that was the idea of, do we need a common good economy, in example? How do we need to, you know, have a kind of change in that regard? And also there was a question on the chat from Sudhir, going in a similar direction, asking, are there situations we can imagine where unkindness is required? So I thought that's also very valid and interesting and important question. Thank you.
No, thank you. Amrish, yes, please go for it. Amrish, can you hear us?
Yes, hi. Am
Yes.
I audible?
Yes, yes.
Right. So taking from some of the points from the Q&A and, especially what Ludo mentioned, I think a very important point about the cultural aspect as well, which came to mind, So though the profit is the stated reason why most of the companies unfortunately exist, and they also put very clearly in their vision that they want to be the number one in their chosen field of work and so on. But then I think important aspect is also where these companies exist. So I'm talking more from a cultural point of view, where these companies, have their head offices, and from where most of the policies and procedures run into the organization's DNA. And an example of that would be, again, coming back to where I am in Middle East. The ILO regulations are just used as a reference point. They're not really used to inculcate a strong people-centric policy within the organizations, meaning the minimum requirements are met and it is left at that. So when you talk about things like kindness, these are a much evolved state of being. They're not just there for, to make the company look good in the public domain, but they are there because the companies really feel that they have to be kind. Now, what it basically means is organizations which are in advanced geographies, for example, would be in a much better position to look at their overall systems aligned to kindness, and therefore better employee experiences, as compared to the other places where the evolution has not, the evolution of business itself has not reached a point where it transcends the profit mentality into more humanitarian aspect of things. So that's my point I wanted to make at this point. Yeah, thanks.
No, fair enough. I think that's a great point around the evolution and where is an organization in terms of its own maturity, right? And this is a fascinating discussion. Great points coming in from both the panelists and people in the audience, right? If we just try to also consolidate some of the thoughts and try to dig deeper, right, and then maybe just open it up for a reflections all round, right? So at one level, I think nobody's arguing with the fact that businesses are important, profitability is important, profits are important. Somebody who is investing in a business, somebody who's creating a business is taking a risk, so they will expect certain returns. So I think that is an assumption that is probably okay with most people. I think where the question starts cropping up now is that today we find ourselves in a world which is disintegrating across any domain that we look at, which means that there is certain things that are not going right, clearly, right? And which means that we need to look deeper. It does not mean that we whitewash everybody with the same brush, but there are people, leaders, corporations out there who could be doing things in a much different way, right? And I think we spoke about, at some level, we're speaking about the assumptions of middle managers. We're talking about the systemic mindset shift from a century ago to now. We're talking about the purpose of business. And we are speaking about, what kind of businesses are more evolved than the others, and so on and so forth. I think at some level, it goes back to the business owners, the shareholders, the investors, and the senior and the key employees that are there in the organization. That what is the mindset that we bring to the table, right? Because I think what we have been hearing in some ways, and if I can try to put some words, and maybe this may not kind of be agreeable to everybody, that certain emotions like greed, fear, envy are probably emotions that are actually driving some of these, what we are calling unkind behaviors, right? So what I mean by that is, you have business people all around the world, startups, large corporations, small startups, etc. There are some who want to make a decent return, and that's completely okay. There are some probably who are super greedy, right? We know what greedy means. It's not going to be, we can't define it in numbers, but we know what greedy means. Now, when you are greedy, you are going to prioritize economic profit over everything else, right? And I think that's the mindset that is probably playing out there. Envy is the other aspect, right? Envy is when I'm, it can be a middle manager or a senior manager, right? Who's working in an organization, sees that somebody else is performing much better than I am. Hey, I don't want to lose out. Can I take a shortcut, right? I don't know, for example, the example that Upashana took about the media executive, right? Was it coming from a place of power? Was it coming from a place of envy? Was it coming from a place of fear? For example, I fear that I will lose out in this competitive world, and so I need to be hyper competitive. Or was it coming from a place of envy that there are other journalists who are doing much better than I am, and so on. So, but there is certain human emotions which are triggering these actions, right? And at some level, I think what this panel is kind of saying, and all the audience is also saying, is that there are probably two sides to this. One is the top down, looking at it more systemically, looking at what's the context of the world today, what should be the purpose of the business, what's the system that we want to set up in some ways, right, within which everything will operate. Also, on the other hand, I think there's a bottom-up look that is happening, that at the end of the day, every single individual out here is taking a decision. And the kind of decisions we take is determined by the emotions and the belief systems that we carry. And is there a way for us to actually, kind of regulate that in some ways, right, where needed? At least is something that I'm kind of picking up. I may have added a bit of my own views there, but I want to take a pause and maybe at this point, just at the 1 hour, I think 50-minute mark or 20-minute mark, I think maybe just look at some of these questions that are there. And I know that some of you have already answered some of these questions, but it'll be probably interesting to go through this, right? Because I think the idea is not to get to a point where we have a very clear one answer, but I think, if we can get a lot more opinions, I think we'll get to something richer here. So I think, Clifton, you referred to Sudhir's question, and Sudhirji, thank you so much. I think you have mentioned to help the organization prosper in a competitive environment, steps of unkindness is required. So here you're, and Sudhirji, if you want to, elaborate on that and bring out your point of view, I think that would be great. Dave, is it possible to get through that?
Yes, I've just unmuted.
Yes,
Sudhirji.
sure. So Sudhirji, if you can please.
Saket, are you getting my voice?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, let me tell you briefly that as a civil servant in my 35 years of career, I moved across various positions. What I found was, as a head of the organization and looking at the HR policies, we observed that there are certain employees whose performance and whose behavior was such that it was affecting the functioning of the organization. And at that point of time, being ahead, we were rather asked to take very drastic step, and we took it. And we compulsorily retired very senior civil servants. Now, at that point, we did it. But then what happened was, after a couple of time we were making them compulsory retired, we observed that this is not the foremost solution for all this. Something somewhere has gone wrong. Probably the people who are recruited have a different mindset of, say, not functioning, but sort of gaining more profit and observing other employees to work, and they want to just be a deadwood. That is one point which I observed in my career. Secondly, as a finance man also, I observed that the demand for funds were always there for an organization of various units which were part of the organization. But as a finance man, we had to be very strict. If the demand was for 100 rupees, we were, because of the funds paucity, we were forced to sort of give them very less to ensure that these people use the funds in a very orderly way. And thirdly, I also function in a position of industry looking after the food processing industry, where the competition was very high. And at that point, our attitudes changed. And then this is where, we had to see that we select an organization for ensuring that the food processing industry functioned well, and not those people who were just looking for funds and they swindle the funds. So that is what I would rather say, is that when you are in a different position, your attitudes, your mindset changes. If you are in a social sector, I worked in a social sector also, looking after the needs and the responsibilities of youth in our country. Then my attitude changed. We were looking at a very different angle, that how to skill the youth, how to help them find employment. There, kindness developed. And this is what actually I am observing now in the whole of my career, that your approach to the problem solving and to ensure that an organization is functioning well, we have to be unkind at certain points. And at certain points, we have to be kind also. That is in a nutshell, like I can say to you.
No, thank you, Sudhirji, and well put. And Clifton, I'll hand it to you. But I think the distinction that I want to draw out here, right, and I think this is coming up. I think everybody's saying that sometimes in organizations you have to take tough calls, right? You have to. Everybody has. Unfortunately, I've had to, kind of also let go of people, right? And now it's how are we going about it? How am I thinking about it? For example, I'll take the example, Sudhirji, you mentioned when you had to let go of people. It was a very conscious decision that you took, knowing that there are certain people who are affecting the rest of the organization. They are, they are probably not being useful to the organization, and they are, in fact, there are certain things that are not, being done the right way, and therefore they need to be, kind of asked to move out, right?
Yeah.
And I think we are not defining this as unkind. That is a good decision, potentially, right? That's a well thought through decision. I think what we are trying to kind of also define here is that kindness would be a decision where, for example, on a very similar context, Clifton, I'm taking your example, where a decision was taken to kind of acquire people and give new contracts to people. When they are wanting to have a discussion about that with the owner says that I do not want to even speak about that. Now, there, I'm kind of trying to understand what the mindset of that owner might have been, right? It might have been that, I have the power to decide what I want to do, and I will do what I have to do. Or it could be a fear that, if I open up a conversation here, I may have to go back on my decisions and lose my profits, for example, right? I do not know what the mindset was, but the behavior towards people was unkind because that person did something which was, not something very human. So I think there is a distinction. There are tough decisions. They can be well thought through decisions, maybe uncomfortable, but thought through. On the other hand, there are decisions which are not done in the right way and they are unkind. So I think that's a great point, Sudhirji, you brought up with that example, actually, that tough decisions have to be taken. And Clifton, over to you. I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And also referring to the insights Sudhir shared with us, thank you for this. And particularly picking your last statement or your last experience which you have shared, that where you switched to the non-profit sector, and what I understood is that you also changed. Your perspective has changed. Your own views have changed. You were somebody else who had to take tough decisions and had to be unkind before, and that has changed to some extent. And I think that's a wonderful example. And my point is now, so what was it what made you change, Sudhir? And what is it perhaps in general what could make us change? And looking at this at the whiteboard in front of us, I think a key changer are role models. And so that's why I'm kindly asking you perhaps to put the keyword role model on it. And this, I want to link this to a manager, a top manager, an owner of a business or a politician. These are role models. And as long as they reward an unkind behavior in a certain sense, I think, Shaikat, you gave the example of a middle management person who was using elbows to get up. That only works when it is successful in the end, when it's recognized. So again, it's up to the owner or to the top management or to role models to make that, you know, function and work or not. So that was something I wanted to share with all of you. Thank you. Back to you guys.
Yes, thanks a lot, Clifton and Archana. I'll just get to you. In fact, along with the idea of role model, maybe another sticky that we could put on is around consequences, right? And I think we have referred to it in various degrees through this conversation, that sometimes people are able to take certain decisions or operate in a certain way because at least there is no seemingly immediate consequence of that. The consequences may be more long-term, but maybe those are not being, you know, kind of either recognized or are not, you know, stringent enough in some ways. But maybe when we're thinking about the systemic solution, I think consequences are something which might be important as well, right? Archana, yes, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you know, if you think about it in the long term, right now, in a lot of ways, we live in a very unkind society, right? Like as individuals, we've become a lot more self-centered, smaller families, like a lot of like the social fabric is changing. And these points that, you know, Clifton raised and Sudhir raised on, and you, Saikat, on role models and consequences, a lot of this actually, I can relate directly to parenting and the things that you learn when you're like super young, to know that you have to manage your own emotions. You have to learn to be kind. You have to know what consequences are, and having the right set of role models as your parents, you know, that's something that I think as an individual, I can do to create a kinder society tomorrow. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Archana, I think parenting the world, I think is what we're getting to. No, but I think that's a very valid point. I think what you mentioned, right? Because it's some of the very basics which are going wobbly. Upashana, yes. Sorry, I think Christine also had your hand up, but right after that, maybe.
Did you want me to go first?
Sure, you could. No worries.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to add to what Clifton said, because the part about the role models, because that was definitely what made the big change in the organization that I referred to earlier, which is a very big organization in Norway. That's the starting of the transition to build a really, you know, kind and compassionate culture within the financial company started when the CEO actually acted out who he really was. He is, people knew that he was a social democrat. And so we had no reason to not believe the project that he wanted to take on when he entered the bank as a CEO. He wanted to tear away the silos, to get everyone on the same page, to really come up with what is the main reason for this institution to exist. And when that kind of initial work was done, he wanted us to act on it. And he started a blog, an internal blog, where he wrote about this. And we saw that when colleagues dared to be transparent and open and addressing difficult decisions, he would lift them up and put them into important projects taking place where they could actually get a voice. So I think role models is a really good keyword here.
Absolutely. I'll have a point on that, but I'll, why don't you, Upashana, come in with your point? Hey, Upashana, I think we are just, your audio is not very clear.
Can you hear me now?
Much better.
All right, sorry. So the point about role models and consequences and perhaps incentives as well. So what Christine, you just mentioned about, having a role model as your leader, right? So that is something that like even in my current organization at BYLC, so we want to create, we want to be more climate friendly. So recently we decided that we're not going for plastic at all. It's a hard decision. It's a really, really difficult decision because in a country like ours, it's a developing world. It's expensive. It's going to be, difficult to source all those materials, but we are going to do that. And similarly, as you've mentioned, Christine, our founder also has that kind of leadership where he rewards those who speak up, where they are pushed into management positions, where they're because I think what matters here is that these kind of leaders, they see the potential of the people who are speaking up. They understand that they are not just like they're not just like puppets, or they're just not yes men, but they're going to actually work for the betterment of not just the society, but the organization itself. So the other thing that I just wanted to mention about is, I think Manish had a question about incentives, what kind of incentives that we can have. So just putting it out there, we are a very value-driven organization, a small organization that's extremely value-driven. So whenever our colleagues, like, they practice a value very, when they are exemplary practicing a value, they are rewarded with, or they're honored with, like, this person practiced respect for others, or this person practiced empathy or excellence in everything we do. They're rewarded with a small a break or something similar to that. So I think rewards are also very important. Incentives are also important to show people that if you are doing something good, you get something good in return. Or
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, and I'll also club that within consequence, because incentives, rewards, recognition are all actually types of consequence which reinforces good behaviors, penalizes bad behavior, right? And I think the other aspect that I think a lot of people have written about, right, on the questions, and I was reading that, is about how inclusive is the process of decision making, because oftentimes probably the challenge happens when power is centered, right, with very few, and then the kind of decision sometimes can be unkind because you haven't thought through, right? And there could be more innovative ways of doing things, and innovation can be driven only if there is enough collaboration, enough inclusion in the process. So possibly that is a third bucket of how do we make the entire culture and process a lot more inclusive, right? And of course, there is a bunch of other thoughts. We are probably running out of time a little bit here, although I would love to go on, but we had committed like a 1.5 hours, and it's good and bad. I mean, I feel bad that we'll have to probably cut short here, but I feel really good that it seems like the conversation is just getting warmed up, right? And there is just so many more layers to uncover here, and be able to get to something that helps all of us, right, put a template to it as to how can this be done? Because this is really about the newer generation in some ways, right? Yeah, there's just too much at stake at this point, and I think these kind of conversations are very, very, I think, useful. And I'm sure that there are many such conversations happening across the globe, right? And all of you must be participating in those conversations in different forms. And I mean, it'll be great if there is a way to actually also bring them together, enable cross learning in some ways, because I don't think all of us, any one of us, have the single answer. In fact, like we said, I think role modeling and inclusiveness is probably a really key way to go. But with that, unfortunately, I mean, Dave, what do you think? Do we have some more time? But I know we had committed, and taken time from everybody's busy schedule. So probably in the interest of being disciplined, we'll probably just, put a stop here, at least from my end. Dave, I'd love to hand it over back to you. And it'll be great if you can get a few voices in, because there were some really interesting questions. I haven't been able to address all of them, but Dave, I leave that to you to see if we can manage that within the time. And if the panelists, you're okay with that, you can raise your hands or something. So we'll know. If you're not, if somebody has an engagement and I understand, then we can stop that.
Yeah, I see Amrish has raised his hand. Please, Amrish, go ahead.
No, I think he was just saying that he's okay to hear in a few thoughts from the audience.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
But I think everybody else has, I think, something to go to. So probably yes. We'll keep a note of these questions, and maybe we'll figure out a way of, okay, Christine has also put up her hand. So that's great, that's two. And so has Ludovic. Okay, so Dave, why don't you go ahead and maybe wrap it up, and we can continue to take in the questions. Any of the panelists, if you have to drop off after at least Dave has spoken, please feel free to do that. But we can continue the discussion a little bit longer with some of the people who are, on the, we have asked those questions and listening in, right? So over to you, Dave.
Yes, thank you so much. No, I think I've just been silently watching this conversation kind of unravel, and there's a lot of information that's come in that I would love to sit down and really go through with a fine-tooth comb, but unfortunately don't have the time to. But we would like to take this opportunity to do two things. One is, of course, give a vote of thanks. So I just want to quickly share my screen and go through this. So of course, we want to thank our outreach partners, Bloom India Strategy, and Ludovic, who had also raised a point initially, for really coming in and helping us spread the word on the session. This really wouldn't have been possible with the support of our stellar panelists themselves. So I again want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. I think your sort of diverse worldview, your professional experiences have all really colored this session in a really positive and a really fruitful way. And we have so much to take from this and kind of continue to add on to that larger puzzle piece, when we say that we're designing kindness. And we'd love to, be able to maintain this relationship going forward. And as and when necessary, I think we'd love to kind of revisit some of these core concepts and get more of get more feedback from you on this, if possible. I also want to take this opportunity to quickly point out a few people in the team who've been instrumental to this. As you can imagine, this has been an event a long time in the making. So in addition to the entire team who've also been very, very busy, but have also stepped out of the way to help us spread the message on this. Manish, of course, right here. He is the head of innovations here at XLeap, and he's in fact the, let's say, brains behind this event. He was the one that sort of came up with this concept, to begin with. Shurkat, of course, he's been on the panel. He's been a stellar moderator. He's also, sort of the brains behind pulling this out of thin air and really, very, very thoroughly planning each and every portion of the session, from how the flow is going to look like to how the whiteboard is going to look like. Aneri, right here, she kind of heads our business analytics here at XLeap. And she's been really, really helpful in putting together our kind leader module. So thank you so much, Aneri, for being so patient with our last minute requests. And Prithvi, of course, who you saw, for capturing all these diverse viewpoints. And with that, I want to bring this session officially to an end, although, we'd have people staying back, but we're XLeap, and let's get in touch and make a kinder world possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dev, and it'll be great. I just, kind of dropped a note that it'll be great to hear reflections from people. I think, maybe from the panel itself, before you want to drop off, maybe if you can just share your thoughts in terms of, what it felt like for you in some ways, right? Anybody can please go. Yeah, go. You don't have to, raise your hands. Please just go.
Right. From my end, just loads of thanks to the panelists and for XLeap for organizing this event. Just because of lack of time, we couldn't probably reach the goal that we would have anticipated in the beginning. Shekar, correct me if I'm wrong, and also Dave. You think there is a possibility of a follow-up session at a later phase where we can pick up where we left, kind of thing, or how do you propose to take this forward?
In fact, would love to hear everybody's view. I would love to. This was a very engaging conversation, and like I said, I felt like it's just getting started. So I would love to do that. I mean, it is up to everybody else also. If you're on for it, we'll organize something in some time and just make sure that it fits into everybody's schedule. We'll probably also give a little more time to everybody this time. But I think happy to do that. I'll coordinate Amrish with everybody else and come back on this one.
Right.
Definitely.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.
So thank you. And this is Clifton once again. Definitely my core takeaway is that this is a very interesting matter, and it has changed me today to some extent, because honestly, I was not consciously reflecting on this before. So that was the great takeaway now for me. Thank you to everyone. And if we have a follow-up or not, I definitely will personally work for me and with me, and perhaps together with all of you on that matter in the future. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Absolutely. Hey, Christine, you have your hand up. You please can just go.
Yeah. I could just repeat what Clifton just said. I think this was just an amazing session, and I feel so enlightened, and just like you said, Shakat, that we're just starting to work on something that could be really great, or that it's already great, and we should continue in some form. So please let me know if I can contribute to something, because I think it was just a really, really great session. And I think what you do and what you put effort into doing with putting humans into your designs and focusing on that is just what the world needs, I think. And we need it on a global level. And that's an aspect I love too. I really liked being invited into this cross-cultural panel. It was just, thank you so much for that.
Thank you for coming in. I know what you do, at least a bit. And so it was great to have some of your stories in as well, Christine and Clifton as well. So thank you so much.
I just wanted to add as well, Shoikat, it's been a pleasure, and just hearing all these diverse opinions, and we always want to incorporate compassion and kindness, empathy in all our programs to kind of trying to get that from such different people from different countries with different life experiences. It's been an excellent, amazing experience so far, and I do wish, as Ambrish has put it, I do wish that we can continue it in some form. I'd love to contribute.
Amazing, absolutely great to have you, Pashna. Fantastic.
Shagad, if I may. So thanks for having me. And I think I came in with like zero expectations to the session. Okay. But then I'm going out of it thinking about what I can do to bring kindness to my own organization. So that's I think a great point to start. And if you have like follow-up sessions, happy to like join and like uncover all of those layers that we were talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. And, in fact, it was so interesting that when we were doing the briefing call with Archana, we had almost started the session then itself on the call. Then we said, oh, hey, let's hold on. Let's do it when we are there. So absolutely, we should absolutely do that. Great. And do you think they, there are some questions from Akhila, Pemasani, and Charu and others. Do you think we can get them to maybe ask their questions and stuff?
Just one thing, Shaukat, I think Ludovic has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Oh, thank you, Deb. But I thought maybe the panelists have not yet give their closing words, no? It's okay?
Yes, it's fine. Please
Oh,
go ahead.
okay. No, I just wanted also to have some few words of conclusion. First, to thank you, Saikat and Krishna, also, and Deb, we have been in touch for this great session, great first session. I think what you have been doing with this kind of session, and also we are doing also with our organization, is to to create some kind of awareness and mindfulness about our doing business and how to build a better society for everyone. And if we can work on this awareness and mindfulness, for sure, I believe that our natural kindness will come out, because this is as human being, we are gifted with good things, I mean, but maybe we build a kind of society that reinforce more or kind of bad bad behaviors than just letting love, compassion, and empathy come out. So it's also working about this kind of awareness and mindfulness, to be conscious of who we are as a human being, and what why we are here, and why we should put energy and time to build. And this all comes from I think love and compassion, and all the other thing we discussed after will naturally be aligned with Zion, with this, I think. So thank you very much to create this kind of events that help to expand the awareness and mindfulness about this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, Upasana. Thank you so much for dropping in. It was wonderful to have you here. Thank you.
Yep, I need to drop off as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate this. This was amazing. We'll get back to that. Yes, absolutely. Great. Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Are there anybody out there who's wanting to maybe speak about things?
No, I think people have started dropping off.
Okay. Anybody who wants to speak can probably put up their hands, right? So that we'll know.
Yeah.
Is that possible? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So anybody, please, if you have, want to come in with your views, I know it's way over time, but we would still, I think, love to hear your views.
Maybe I can promote everyone to a panelist now.
Oh yeah, why not? I think
Shashidhar
there's
has
one
something to
hand.
say.
Shashi, yes, yes, yes. Hey, Shashi.
Hi, Saket. Yes, very interesting conversations. Like especially the diversity. That has bring in very diverse points that you don't really consider a lot. I think the another interesting point I was also sort of looking at it is like designing a kindness how people the leadership team has a lot of power to sort of put the kindness. And the other thing I was also sort of looking at is it possible for the employees to be unkind towards the organization? I have seen that. I mean, like I have seen that. How employees can be unkind towards the organization. Yeah, that's a different dilemma I was sort of thinking at. The opposite way. Yeah, I mean that's something I wanted to sort of share. Otherwise, yeah, I was thinking a lot of, to be frank, these days I've been thinking a lot about organization development. There was a lot of pointers that was coming up, like compassion, habits, the structures, and then the another thing that I was also sort of going in a similar lines was kindness. That's the one of the reasons I sort of attended the session. It gave me a lot of perspectives to sort of look at. And yeah, I would love to sort of, if there's a second version of this, the part two, the follow up, I would be very interested. Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this.
Hey, no. Thank you so much, Shashi, for coming in and also expressing your views, right? Thank you so much for that. And I think that's a great point you made about employees being unkind to the organization. I think that is something I'll definitely put that back on the one of the touch points of unkindness. I think that'll definitely go in. I agree. That's a great view. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Anybody else? So we can make everybody a panelist, right? So we can hear each other, or there's a limit.
I've enabled everyone to speak, so yeah, they can.
Okay. So anybody has any questions, please feel free. This is like a fairly close circle, so please feel free. Go ahead, share, ask, defer.
It is a Friday evening.
Yeah. So yes, we should be kind to everybody and also
everyone
say
else.
and say let's stop the week, end the week here, and enjoy the break, enjoy the weekend, right? So fantastic. I think then it was great. Dave, thank you so much. Prithvi, thanks. Shivani, Aneri, wonderful stuff.
Oh, is it just my connection, or is it?
No, I think I've lost
yeah,
him.
Shaukat back. Hey, Shaukat, you just dropped off a few seconds.
I did. No, I was just thanking all of you, and I was then basically telling everybody else who's there